The other day I happened to be flipping through channels with Ariana, and I happened to, on the movie called Up. Yeah, people have seen that one. A young boy gets to know a young girl, and they fall in love at a young age, and they get married, and they have all great plans of going on a great secret mission trip and living in a vast place, a Shangri-La of sorts, and they picture themselves in this home someday together. And it so happens that it doesn't work out that way. She becomes sick and ill and dies at an older age, and he's left alone in this house by himself with all his memories, with his book that they compiled as they were kids of all their dreams and their fascinations. And he's living alone in this house. And the next scene comes, and they've got this construction going all around, these big skyscrapers going up, and you've got this little house right in the midst of it. And he will not move. They will not get him out of his house. This is his home. This is where he and Ellie lived for 50 years together. He's not about to move and go into a nursing home. He gets mail and he throws it away about nursing homes. He's having none of it. So happens a day one little boy comes to his door as a little Cub Scout trying to get a merit badge about helping old folks. He's trying very hard to get more patches on his sash for a Boy Scout. And the old man shuns him, and the little boy is very, very tenacious. Well, it turns out that some things happen, and this old man has to leave. Otherwise, he's going to be sent away. And so he does what he does best. He was a balloon salesman in his past, and so unbeknownst to anybody else, in the morning, you see through the chimney a bunch of balloons come up, and the house lifts up off its foundations, and it floats away. And he's floating away. He's got everything going just the way he had planned on it. He's going to his destination where he and his wife have always wanted to go. And he's floating away, and he hears a knock on the door. What in the world is that? Well, he sent this little Cub Scout away to a snipe hunt. He told him how to hunt for snipes. He said, when you get a snipe, come back, and I'll let you in, and I'll give you your merit badge. Well, he opens the door. It's this little boy sitting at the door, and he's pressed up against the wall. He's scared to death because there's thousands of feet below him. So he grudgingly brings the boy in. They develop a relationship. And they float away, and eventually they get to the place where he and Ellie had planned to live out the rest of their lives, on this little place near a waterfall, Shangri-La. Well, as the story unfolds, things begin to happen. There's an evil genius who's looking for a rare bird that this old man happens to find with his boy, and one thing turns to another, and, well, eventually it happens that this old man and this boy are on this evil man's blimp. And in order to save the boy, the old man cuts the strings and lets his house fly away, lets his whole house float away. And the boy goes, "There goes your home, Mr. Fredrickson." And Mr. Fredrickson, who's been now transformed, says, "It's only a house. It's only a house. What used to have so much meaning to me is no longer there for me. I have new meaning in my life. It's my relationship with the boy. His new way of life of sharing more than what he had. He had isolated himself for so many years in hurt and pain that he finally came out of his shell, and it took a 10-year-old boy to do it. So there goes his house. No longer a home. It's an empty shell. It's an empty memory. The things we hold on to, the things we hold dear to us, are hard to give away, aren't they? Little kids sometimes have blankets or teddy bears that they have for years. I did a blanket blessing for an 8-year-old a couple of years ago before she went on her plane trip, because she couldn't part with her blanket. For her, it was a sense of security, a sense of comfort. This was her pal. We all hold on to something dear because it has meaning for us. It has a place in our hearts that nothing can intrude and nothing should intrude in it. It has meaning for us. But when does an object become something more for us? How does that process happen? And when do we let go of it? A few years ago on internship, I visited an older couple, both in their 90s, and she was bound to a wheelchair, and he was fairly active. He was very hard of hearing. And the kids tried to get them to move. They lived on the end of a row house, end of the row houses, and the kids said, you got to move to, Luther Crest, which is like Luther Manor. You've got independent living, assisted living, and the nursing home. It's a transitional kind of living area. And they would have none of it. This is our home. We've had it for 60 years together. This is our home. We've got all kinds of memories here. But the kids couldn't prevail upon them to leave this home that they've made. Later on, a few months later, as I visited them and gave them communion, it happened that there was a fire. She was cooking upstairs, and a grease fire caught fire, and she was unable to put it out. And he was in the basement, and since he was hard of hearing, could not hear her screaming. Eventually, he smelled the smoke and came up. He saw the fire, and by the time he got her out of the house, he was able to get her out. But before he reached the door, he collapsed because of smoke inhalation. He was in the hospital for a couple of months before he died. And now she's in a nursing home, whether she likes it or not. And we thought, you could have had this togetherness at Luther Manor before that. But I know how hard it is when you have something that's so meaningful for you to be forced now to live alone and in a place that's not your home anymore because it has no memories for you. Those run deep. We hear of wars being fought over land that has deep, deep meaning for people. We think of the Middle East. Israelis and Palestinians fighting over a section of land that they really, really want and really, really need. And we scratch our heads and wonder why that is. But on some levels, we all know what that's like, is to hold something true and dear for us that we can't let go. This morning's gospel is very, very deep. God has a place for us, a special place for us. And I'm not saying it's a geographical place. That star on the left, just left of that, that's my place. And that's your room up there, and this is my room. It's talking about a place in the heart, God's heart. God has many rooms, and we each have a special place in God's heart. Place, not physical, but spiritual, emotional place, a connectedness that we can't put our fingers on because it runs deeper than what we can comprehend. And Jesus continues to tell his disciples, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one gets to the Father except through me. And I've struggled with this verse for years. What does this mean? Jesus has a place for us. God has a place for us. And then he comes with this line saying, I have a place for you, but it's except through me that you'll know the Father. And then I started reading the words more closely, and I think, Father. Do I call my dad Father, or do I call him Dad? Do I call him Lowell, or do I call him Dad? There's an intimacy there. Dad is much, much more intimate than calling him Lowell. Hey, Lowell, are we going to meet you at your house for Easter you and Chris? For Easter breakfast or Easter dinner? Or do I say Dad? It's much more intimate that way. And I read these verses and I think, isn't that interesting? Because Jesus is talking about a father, not saying God, but on a more intimate level of saying Father. And then I'd begun to understand, because I have trouble with exclusionary talk. I do. We're right, you're wrong, you're going to hell, we're going to heaven. And then I think about this verse, and I struggle with it over and over again, and I think, maybe it's talking about something that I'm not even seeing. Maybe it's deeper than that. Maybe it's a home that I can't understand. Jesus is directing people to a much deeper level of their understanding of God. On a Father level. No one can know the intimate truth the intimate relationship without Jesus, because Jesus is sitting there in flesh and blood and showing us the way, showing how it's done, showing what it means to have a home, to have a place of security, comfort, and peace. A place that no one can touch. A place for us. This opens up windows for me. It deepens my thought. It deepens my sense of faith, knowing that Jesus has a place. The place is not a geographical location, but it's the way of Christ, the way, the journey. You will do greater things than these. Anybody remember 9/11 and what happened that day when the planes crashed into the Twin Towers and crashed into the Pentagon and in Gettysburg and those things? Do you remember what you did on that day? Do you remember what you did? I remember sitting at Walker Technical in Allentown, watching it on the computer screen, watching it happen in disbelief. And then a friend of mine said, we need to do something. What was the first thing that came to our minds was, we need to give blood. I wonder how many people in that building are wounded and people going into the building who will be wounded and much need of blood. So we went into town and we went to the blood center and we stood there amongst a line that went outside the door. And there was no one giving cookies, so I took it upon myself to give everybody cookies and make sure people had enough to eat. And they were short on help, and we just jumped in to do what we could in an emergency situation as we saw it. But I'm thinking, you will do greater things than these. All these people coming together. What do we do when there's a disaster? Now, we all know that we all come together in a tight, cohesive group, and we do what we can. That's greatness. That's following Christ. That's being Christ to other people. That's offering a place of Christ and showing people that place. Showing people that Father that we all know in our hearts, that we all feel. Christ is among us, and we are to be Christ with each other. And when we come together as a community of faith, we can do greater things. We can do great things. It's just a matter of recognizing that Father, that intimate relationship that can't be severed, that can't be broken by any means, that we are knit together as a people of Christ, as a people of God, and Jesus is the one who shows us the way of truth, the way of God, the way of the Father, the way of Daddy, on a most intimate level that we can't understand on our own. And this is the Christ that gives us life, that gives us purpose, that drives us in our lives, that helps us to be in our place of God. Amen.